Everybody, welcome to the Varied Life. Steve here, the retired hobby tech guy living in Korea, expat. And unfortunately, as bad as things have gotten in the United States, it kind of drove me and my wife to retire overseas because things are so much better. We're kind of getting the same with Bambu Labs. For those of you who don't know, Bambu Labs has put out 3D printers, FDM printers that you could, put in a file and you could print out some pretty cool stuff. And yeah, it's amazing what you can do. The maker universe, tinkering around and building and making things and selling things. There's people that have entire print farms of tons and tons of 3D printers from Bambu Labs, which is kind of the Apple of the 3D printing world. And now they've changed the game. It's upgrade or die. And if you don't, Bambu Labs firmware could cripple your printers. Is that a deal maker for people who are considering 3D printers like myself? Yeah. Unfortunately, that's what we got going on. I woke up to this, and this was actually on 16 January. Bambu Labs announced that future firmware updates would introduce an authorization or authentication protection mechanism for their connection and control, all in the name of your safety and security. This change is mitigating any risk of remote hacks or printer exposure that have happened in the past, and also lower the risk of abnormal traffic or attacks. I kind of have a hard time with that. Okay, first of all, you're requiring people to get onto the cloud service for authorization where hackers are known to be residing is online. And so if I'm the person that wants to do my own little local land that is outside of the interwebs, or I'm just going to use, I'm just going to use a little chip card and put my little 3D thing that I want to print out, and I poke that into my machine and I print it out. Yeah, there's no risk of remote hacks or anything like that. Lowers the risk of abnormal traffic or attacks. If my printer is not hooked up to the internet and it's hardwired, or like I said, I just end up using a memory stick, a memory card, or whatever to print the things on the printer that I bought from Bambu. Yeah, that's not true. That's absolutely not true. And even then, the problem with this whole deal is that you have to get cloud authorization. That's opening Pandora's box of saying, Big Brother, I don't know, what are the odds of that happening? Some big conglomeration of a company who belongs to a country that is not so, I don't know, how should we put this? They don't like freedom. Okay, I'm just going to throw that out there. They're a little bit controlling. Of course, every country is controlling, and unfortunately, Bambu Labs is kind of jumping onto this because now, if you don't have that authorization, what can they do? Well, they can brick your machine, your 3D printer, so that you can no longer print. They can, excuse me, so many bad things coming out of China. So anyway, it ends up that, yeah, now they can stop you from printing. Let's say, this looks like a gun, so you can't print that, or this looks like that, or whatever it is, and they could limit what you could print or not print under the guise of we're doing it for safety and security. I mean, this is further down the road, but unfortunately, what we're seeing is this cloud authorization is not something that a lot of people are keen on. So many people have, they want to do their business, and perhaps they live in a place where there's no internet or little internet. Maybe they work on, things that are proprietary for their customer base, and they don't want those products, plans, or anything being, I don't know, accessible through the interwebs where hackers and printer exposure issues have happened in the past. Well, if you if you don't require this, then those things won't happen. But now it's going a step further, because now if you don't get the firmware upgrades, it's talking about that you might not even be able to print on your machine. And now this isn't covering all 3D printers. This is just Bambu Labs. And we're going to look over some stuff here, because this is some serious juju. And as someone who has gotten into the hobby technology in resin printing, I just finished, I swear to God, I just finished a video editing and loaded it up. It's going to be out on like the 22nd or 23rd of what's upcoming for the channel here in 2025. You know, with the Lunar New Year and all that, living in Korea, I'm having a great time. And one of the things I wanted to get interested in and, you know, dip my toe in and get involved in is 3D FDM printing. And one of the companies that was at the top of my list was Bambu Labs, because they're rumored to come out with a new printer, larger build area, and they are like the Apple of the FDM printing world. The problem is now, kind of like Apple sometimes, and even I know I have an Apple, so many things could be so much better with it, but they're kind of hijacking and saying what you can and can't do. And it's riling up a lot of feathers. And under the guise of safety and security, what about the people like me who don't want to hook up to the internet? And we don't need to hook up to the internet. So why are you requiring and changing the terms of the agreement when I bought the machine? Thankfully, I haven't bought a machine, or customers or users who have bought a machine could do what they want. They could use another slicer program, but now you retroactively change the terms and conditions to now you're saying, well, if you don't get these upgrades, yeah, your machine's going to be a brick. And in case you don't know what a brick is a brick. It's useless, and it just sits there and does nothing. So for the old folks out there, if you're wondering what a brick is, when something is turned into a brick because it doesn't have authorization from, you know, the gods above and the online cloud and all that stuff, it makes that item or product that you bought basically useless and a paperweight. That makes sense. So anyway, yeah, this is what's been going on with Bambu Labs. So we're going to take a look at some interesting stuff here, and we'll make me a little bit smaller. And this is from a page on, this guy is Ross mangroup.com, and he's got this wiki page. And Bambu's Lab Authorization Control System. Now, we'd already talked about this. Changes mitigating risks, so remote hacks or printer exposure issues that have happened in the past, and lower the risk of abnormal traffic or attacks. Well, if you have a cloud-based system, that's how hackers get into an attack. If you don't have a cloud-based system and you don't require that, then users are not going to have that problem, which many people, a lot of people don't have that problem with just setting up their own LAN, setting up their own hardware system, whatever it is, or like I said, just using the little, you know, card there to do their prints, and because of maybe security concerns or proprietary information or projects or so on and so forth. So basically we're going to go over this, and this is what ended up happening here. Was this here? It says 7.4, your Bambu Lab product will automatically search and download for new update packages to provide you with timely update services. Now, in the past, we've seen this a lot. And I'm talking from the perspective of a guy who worked on the very first computer in the military that had multi-mate and had 5.25 inch drives or 5.5 inch drives. And yeah, it was green screen text and the whole 9 yards. And upgrading and updating services, you know, to get rid of bugs and make things work efficiently is kind of a good thing. So that's good. We see that on our computers and phones all the time. And it says, you know, these updates are designed to resolve cybersecurity loopholes, and prevent new threats. That is important to accept and install security-related system updates in a timely manner. Due to the importance of these updates, your product may block new print jobs before the update is installed. You will immediately provide update notifications to help you understand the related information. That is where people are losing their minds, and kind of rightly so, because what they're saying is before you could have your product and you could print, you could do whatever it wants. If you wanted a firmware upgrade, you could take it, or if you didn't like the new firmware upgrade, you could always go back to the previous one and you could stick with that. Why fix something that isn't broke if it's working for me? And many people fall into that category. And again, we go back to the security concerns of business owners and clients not wanting their information to be thrust into the interwebs and the cloud, regardless if it's Bambu Clouds or anybody's cloud, because now they're actually doing what they say that they're protecting you from, supposed to be protecting you from. It's just very problematic. And the new terms of service comes in, and like it says up here, however, specifically says, what happens if I never want to upgrade the firmware? This is very problematic because, like with my 3D resin printer, you can get firmware upgrades and so on and so forth, and you'll get notifications, and you can go look and say, well, hey, this is what my the upgrade is going to fix, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, if you don't have any need for that, or you're happy with where you're at, and you don't, why fix it if it's not broke, and you just continue doing your thing, then just leave it at that. But we're not seeing that. You may continue to use an older firmware version, but that does not include the new security updates. However, this means printers may miss out on important security bugs, fixes, or bug patches included in newer versions. So that doesn't sound bad, but basically they're kind of hijacking you and saying, well, if you don't get the upgrade and get this authorization, you won't get the security bug fixes or bug patches, but it still could brick your equipment. While defenders of Bambu Lab point out that offline modes such as SD card printing and LAN-only setups remain functional, others point out the term of service does not explicitly limit this restriction to cloud-based printing. So the ambiguity I always have problems with that word, has led to speculation Bambu Lab could enforce broader limitations effectively rendering printers inoperable for users who choose not to update. Now, I don't know about you, but if you are a business person and you have clientele, or both of you have security concerns, you have proprietary information, maybe it's classified, maybe it's highly sensitive, or for copyright concerns and so on and so forth, and you just don't want that stuff having to be given over the air in the cloud that has to travel from your location to the cloud, which ends up in servers in China. That's kind of who can see everything, anything and everything that you do. There could be problems with this, and a number of people have cited problems of the possibilities of this happening before. Debate over bricking. The debate is extended. Some community members assert that if a printer is unable to accept new print jobs without an update, it becomes a non-functional and ends up being a brick that we talked about. Other counter that as long as certain offline functionalities remain, that term does not accurately apply. Now, again, this is the thing, because Bambu Labs has not been specific in that regard of saying, well, if you have your own LAN, if you have your printer hooked up to your own LAN, you don't have to worry about getting firmware updates if you don't want them. Or if you just use SD card printing, you're totally fine. You don't have to worry about this. Just drive on and do what you do. The fact that they haven't addressed this, and that this has been brought up in the past, this isn't like an unusual thing. This has been out in the 3D printing world for quite some time. And even before that, it's been in the computer world and industry, commercial industry and private industries and so on and so forth, for decades and decades. So this is not something new that has just popped up. So that's why the lack of specifics on this is causing problems with so many people when they're looking and they're saying, they read this change in the terms and conditions of their thing and saying, well, now I'm being forced to get firmware upgrade, regardless of whether I want it or not, I must get cloud authorization. And with that cloud authorization, that opens your system, the cloud, and whoever runs the cloud, Bambu Labs, to be able to access all of the information, access the cameras, access keystrokes, files, things that are downloaded from your computer over to the printer. And all of that stuff can just be scooped up, no problem. Yes, you can put security fixes and things like that in place, but the fact remains, if you put something out on the air and into the interwebs, somebody can hack it if they really, really want to. And yeah, we've seen that in government level security systems. And now, we think that Bambu Labs is going to do a better job than the military bases and their security, computer systems that they have around the world, and those things get hacked. Yeah, I'm color me skeptical. Communities strategies to deal with these risks, operating printers exclusively in offline modes, which is again using the SD card or your own LAN. As it talks about there, exploring alternative firmware or third-party scripts to restore full functionality. The problem is with that is that they have a product, they can make the firmware that can detect if you're using unauthorized applications or you're trying to do an unauthorized firmware update that will kind of block you out of the system. They can do that to where it ends up being a brick and you broke the terms and conditions of the agreement, even though they changed it after the fact, and you're left with a worthless piece of steel and plastic and other things. So their justification and rebuttal is that it is in order to protect against remote hacks, printer exposure, and abnormal traffic or attacks. The thing is that the majority of this happens on their side. So they're going to require you to get a firmware update so that you have to get authorization from the cloud. And Bambu Labs is probably one of the biggest 3D printing companies in the world. So forcing everybody to go online to get this authorization, I don't know how that's going to reduce the abnormal traffic. Number of attacks. If you're not on the cloud-based system, you are definitely less of a chance of getting hacked unless somebody really wants to. And if somebody really wants to, you're going to get hacked. That's just the way it is. But for the mom and pop and the small business, or even the smaller medium-sized businesses that use Bambu Labs and their P1S or their X1C 3D printers, I just don't see that. Printer exposure. The people that deal with classified or proprietary information or products that other people build for others, it just doesn't seem like that's going to be a good thing. So I'm just having a problem with this. In the article cited about printer exposure, the hack was carried out largely because of user misconfiguration. Printer exposure may be mitigated by offering more convenient ways to securely expose printers to the internet so that users are not tempted to allow unauthenticated access over the network. Abnormal traffic might be mitigated by steps Bambu has already put in place, as detailed in our own article. Therefore, in order to get attention, the researcher decided to infect machines and display a harmless message to spread publicity. So basically, it's just and they want to be able to prevent that. It seems like an innocuous little thing that somebody just put a harmless little message, But the fact that, this knee-jerk reaction of forcing everybody onto the cloud, on one side it sounds good. On the other side, there are some issues to contend with. Like I said, you can end up doing a LAN mode authorization because now there's talk of that unless you have this authorization from the cloud, period, that it could disable the LAN mode. Bambu Labs has the ability to be controlled over both cloud and LAN. This allowed users to integrate their printers into private networks and maintain full control without having to rely on Bambu for the cloud access. The new authorization system mandates that even land-based systems must go through an authentication process using Bambu Connect to retain full control. Full local access is still possible and unchanged for those not using the cloud. But the problem is that once if you send, bits and bytes over the interweb, over the air to their cloud services, at one point in time, somebody can reach out and grasp that information and use it against you. The big thing is privacy concerns, as we see here, requiring the authentication for LAN mode, data being unnecessarily exposed to Bambu servers, even for local operations. The printer was also connected, can be controlled by the cloud when sending prints locally. This is in conflict with those who have to comply with CFR, and it gives a bunch of legal things for the United States. Loss of offline independence while also using the cloud. Again, it's kind of like, I'm sort of pregnant. It doesn't really make sense, or military intelligence, or honest politician. Before, users could have hybrid offline setups. The requirement for authorization removes this option unless users revert to older firmware versions, which Bambu does not allow people to do once they've updated their firmware using the new update. So this is very problematic because, like with 3D resin printers, I have one from Elegoo, the Saturn III Ultra, and you can do a firmware upgrade, and if some crazy things start happening, which tend to happen from time to time, I can always go back to the previous firmware version that I know that works, and I can just stick with that. I'm not required to update it any further. But now Bambu is saying that, you can't go back. Once you go black, you can't go back at all. And it's just not a good thing from what we're seeing. Increased complexity, the added layer of authentication layer complicates workflows for users who build custom setups or relied on third-party integrations for LAN control while retaining cloud functionality. Basically, let's put this into senior person vernacular. It ends up that, you have to do a lot more button clicks and typing than you need to. And nobody likes doing that. It just is what it is. If I want to operate my 3D printer offline in a LAN mode where I have my own computer LAN that is not touching the interwebs and thus nobody can gain access to it, I'm going to have to press some buttons and keys and enters and strokes and whatever and click the mouse a bunch of times. But this would require even more. But again, it doesn't come away by being totally independent because you're still required that authorization. It's kind of like you buy a car and now you have to get authorization to drive the car even though you have a license and you paid for the car. It doesn't make sense. And we'll get more into those. Critics have likened this potentially functionality to similar cases where, like back in the day, HP had printers and that it wouldn't print if it had or found out that you were using third-party ink cartridges. It would basically end up being a brick. And then we get to the place of where you had printers that if you couldn't even scan documents if you didn't have printer ink. And if you think, gas is expensive today, no, printer ink is expensive. Printer ink is way expensive. If I could go back in time, I would buy Bitcoin and then I would invest in printer ink because that stuff is gold. I mean, you think gas is expensive? Hell no. Printer ink is the bomb. So, the other one is rendered Tesla software locks on secondhand vehicles. And so, in other words, we've seen a lot of that where people buy secondhand Teslas and it's like, nope, you can't have access to this or that or the turbocharging or whatever it is, warranty problems and this and that. You can't, it just caused a lot of problems. And it's like, well, if you bought the thing, you should have control over the thing. Otherwise, you didn't buy the thing, you're leasing the thing, but you did buy the thing, but they're treating it like it's a lease, or you're buying it on payments, or it's not really yours to begin with. So you didn't buy the thing, but they're telling you that you bought the thing. Yeah, it just ends up, authorization will be rolled out in phases, starting with the X1 series printers, January 17th, which is already behind us, and a full release scheduled for January 23rd, which is, what is today? Today is the 20th, so we got a few days. P&A series printers will get similar updates at an unspecified date. To use printers with the new authorization system, users must update multiple pieces of software. Bambu Studio must be updated to version whatever that is or higher. And for those of you who don't know, Bambu Studio is the proprietary software and slicer program that Bambu has for their printers. Bambu Handy mobile app, kind of the same thing, just on your phone. Then new Bambu Connect application must be installed for using third-party slicers. I think this is going to be a step in the direction where they say you can use third-party slicers, and then eventually down the road, it would not surprise me at all if we find out that Bambu cuts that and says, kind of like Apple, we don't like you, so you're not going to be able to participate. You're not going to be on the App Store anymore. There's no way that people, you're dead in the water. I'm getting kind of that feel from Bambu, and it just doesn't, this mandatory software update thing just doesn't sound good to me. And that's what it talks about, the mandatory update for users who update their firmware. Failing to update all components simultaneously will result in certain printer controls becoming unusable. So if you're a business, a small business, and you're making widgets or you're making, maybe some cool little things here, kind of like this, and you're selling those and, just trying to get by and, either as a hobby or a side gig, to put food on the table. If you don't do all this stuff, even if that could just stop that income flow. Even though you bought the printer and you've been using it, and you could even be using it offline, and you don't even want to, you're just doing the card all day long for your little side gig, you might not be able to continue your side gig because of this. Users who continue to maintain third-party software capability can continue using old firmware versions, though this will not be an option for new printers. Imagine that, which will ship with the authorization system pre-installed. So in other words, we're at this place right now where, it's kind of like they're throwing you a bone, the old printers, you'll be able to keep doing that. But basically they're changing the way everything is going to be done. And so the new people that don't know anything about this, who like me, who are ignorant, just coming into 3D printing, that you just buy the machine, you see what it can do, you watch the commercials, and you're like, yeah, all I got to do is press some buttons, and I can print out my favorite thing, and I'm good to go. Without the realization that, you're going to have to do a lot more. And then you're going to be limited, kind of like what Apple did with the app stores and, different things like that. They're basically going to say, hey, we are the Apple of the 3D printing world, and if you don't play by our rules, then you're just not going to be able to play at all. Bambu Labs states these coordinated updates are necessary because the new authorization system fundamentally changes how the printer validates and accepts commands. We should have the option on whether we want to hook up to the cloud or not. It's just a thing. I mean, if I want to buy a toaster, and we'll talk about the toaster, but if I just want a toaster and I want to toast and I want to, toast bagels, and that's all I ever wanted to do, it doesn't need to be hooked up to the cloud. So I should be able to purchase that thing. And if it's not hooked up to the cloud, I can hook it up to my, plug it into my computer, and boom, I can make the toast, make my bagels, and, print whatever I want. I don't need to have authorization, because authorization is because I bought it. So basically, this is calling into question, what is the definition of bought? And did you really buy the thing? And how many fingers are we going to have in the pie if you bought the pie? If you buy a pie and you're like, hey, this apple pie looks really good, and then somebody comes along and they put their finger in it, and you're like, well, wait a sec. Hey, what the hell are you doing? You got your finger in my pie. I bought this pie. And the person follows you around with their finger in the pie. And then eventually, wearing down, you get used to it. And so it's like, it's just one finger. And then it's two fingers. Then it's three fingers. Then it's four fingers. And eventually, you got a ton of fingers in the pie. And you're like, that's disgusting. I don't want this anymore. And I think we're getting to the part of where Bambu Labs is threatening to do this and saying, hey, well, you can't have you bought your cake, but you can't eat it, is basically what they're saying. And it's like, but I bought it. Older versions of Bambu Studio and Bambu Handy lack the authentication mechanisms. But again, all that is going to be done away with a click of a mouse or the click of a button, a tap of a thing on your phone, because the new people are going to come into this and they're not going to know, and they're going to be, how can I say this? Indentured servants to the Bambu cloud. And if you don't, then you can't use the machine the way that you want, that you bought and paid for. Wait a second. I think we need to have some updated definitions on what is bought and leasing, and somewhere in between is this new thing that Bambu is doing, saying, well, if you bought it, you've got a receipt for the printer, but if you don't have this thing here, then you're not going to be able to use it. Well, that means I didn't actually buy it, because you still have massive control over this thing. And if I want to use this thing outside by itself with just me and it, now that just goes against the definition of you bought something from somebody else, because they still have their fingers in the pie. It's just absolutely crazy. Once a printer is updated, here's the other problem with this. And because what does everybody do when there's a firmware update? Firmware update, okay, update, boom. On the computer, you do the same thing. Not a problem. Yeah. Oh, safety, security, bug fix. Yeah. Okay. Click, 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 and you're done. But the problem is that people realize that once a printer is updated to the new firmware, users cannot revert to previous versions that allow full control of the printer using LAN mode access key while assigned into the cloud. This option still exists to disable the cloud. The option still exists to disable the cloud service, but this is going to change. It's not going to stop here. The manufacturer states this change is required for security, but community members note that many of the security vulnerabilities being addressed stem from Bambu's own cloud-centric design choices rather than the inherent risks of local network control. If I have a LAN, a local area network, so I have my computer, I have a computer cable going from my computer to my Bambu printer, and there's no access into my computer because it's not hooked up to the internet. Guess what? There is no risk. For the risk, could somebody actually do that and hack into it? Absolutely. Why somebody would want to do that is beyond me, because it just doesn't make sense. There's no reason for some hacker of that experience to hack into my computer, and because I'm printing out a widget that I'm making and enjoying in my home. That just doesn't make sense at all. This update forces users into using Bambu Connect middleware if they want to retain the cloud functionality. This is just absolutely crazy. So, of course, we're going to see some more information on this. The problem that the community, the 3D printing community, has seen is that there's a lack of transparency here. There's a lack of follow through. There's a lack of saying, hey, well, buy our printer. Well, I bought your printer. Now, you can't use the printer unless you do these extra things. And it's like, well, why can't I use it in and of itself outside of the internet, outside of the cloud? Maybe I live out in the sticks. Maybe I don't like the interwebs. And, there are people actually like that. Or the major concern of I'm doing things that are not illegal but are proprietary to my client, and they don't want any of that possibly getting out into the interwebs, so I operate on my own LAN system, and you're not going to allow me to do that. because you changed the terms and conditions after I bought the printer. So yeah, it's just a disregard for open source collaboration, and a lot of people use Orca Slicer used in the community with Bambu Labs. And it seems like, well, Bambu Labs has taken a step in the direction of saying, hey, we're going to be the only pony in the stall, and we're going to get rid of all these ape hangers, these dingleberries that are kind of stealing our thunder, and we want to have our own inclusive universe. And the way to get rid of that is to make sure that people do firmware upgrades, and eventually down the road, you won't be able to use any type of slicer other than Bambu's. Yeah, it just it's just not going well. there's a lot of people, and here's what I ended up saying. So this is on that guy's page, this Roseman group, and watched his video, and basically he went over the same things that I'm talking to you here. I just expanded a little bit more. I was looking forward to the new Bambu printer this year, the bigger one with the more bells and whistles. I'm seriously looking at other options. This makes the Prusa Core one and other printers with no cloud authorization look like better alternatives. I hope the U.S. government gets involved and talks some sense into Bambu. So yeah, that kind of like what we saw with the TikTok thing. TikTok went down for less than a day, and now it's back apparently. But when it did go down, it's like there was millions of, I sense a disturbance in the force, and millions of shitty influencers were silenced, and yeah, it didn't bother me one bit. I think getting rid of TikTok is actually a good thing. But I mean, seriously, it's like buying a toaster needing cloud authorization to keep you safe from online toast hackers. And if you don't upgrade, you can never make toast again. And if you get the upgrade and you say to yourself, you know what, let me just go back to the old firmware, and because I'm happy with the toasting capabilities of my machine that it had back then, it's like, nope, that's not going to happen. You can't do that. Once you accept it, you can't go back. Oh, and you want to toast a bagel? Now that's totally out of the question, because we don't supply any bagels or authorize any third-party bagel makers. This has put such a bad taste in my mouth about Bambu. It's not even funny. So yeah, it's very problematic. And if we look at some of the comments on here, besides mine, how many comments are on here? 5,290 comments on this guy's video. And it's like, and his video is up here. So I want to give just due to him. Bambu Lab firmware update forces cloud dependency and user lock-in, avoid their 3D printers. And yeah, because you can just kind of see where this is going. This isn't like a one-time thing where they're like, this is a one-time thing and blah. You can always go back or, use previous firmware. They're not allowing you to use previous firmware, which with 3D resin printing, like my Elegoo Saturn III Ultra, I can always go back to the previous firmware. I can go to their website, and there's a list of the old firmware updates. And if I never want to upgrade, I don't have to. If I want new bells and whistles or, whatever that they put out, I don't have to take that because I bought the printer. It's mine. They offer the ability to do the upgrade if I want, but they're not hijacking me. They're not, basically blackballing me and saying, well, hey, you have to agree to this and all of these different things, because if you don't, you're going to end up with a brick. A lot of things people end up saying, like this person here came this close to buying the Bambu Lab printer. I held off because someone told me they were dangerously close to being proprietary or running into this problem. Now I'm glad I'm waited. Bought a cheap Ender I was 2 days away from buying $3,000. And when I saw the first video today, this morning, surprising this was the first English video. The ones that were published first were an Argentinian and a Spanish video. But just so many of these things of people saying, Bambu served me well for 2 years now. Well, it might not after this. Until now, they're relatively open, actually. Easily available parts, comprehensive wiki on repairs, good track record. Not open source, but that is not necessarily. Yeah, and so many people, we're about to purchase 28 of their printers for a classroom situation. This is a deal breaker for us. Again, schools, you want to buy once, cry once, buy once, and that's it. You don't want to have to go through all this stuff. Imagine you're a grown adult, you buy yourself a PC, TV printer, or basically anything. But to use your device in your own house, which you have paid for with your own money, you have to go and call your dad and ask for it. And here's an interesting one. Fun fact, in Australia, consumer laws, everyone with an affected printer will be entitled to a full refund. Yeah, I guess this company Valve was fined $2 million when they had to change their refund policy in Australia. So apparently Australians have got it going on. And yeah, it's just, was considering to buy one, but this is a great way to change my mind. Firmware update. Why does a coffee machine need a firmware update? There's been a pissing match between Prusa and Bambu and my friend's group for years. Thanks for ending it, Bambu. Owners getting bamboozled. This is going to be hard for people who actually never cared until it affects them because of how popular these printers are. Printers blocking print jobs until new firmware is installed mean they already snuck malicious code into the printers while in cloud mode. Yeah, it's just... it's just very problematic. And unfortunately, that's what we have going on. So anyway, yeah, very problematic what Bambu is doing and the lack of specifics that they have in their announcement, and just being able to brick machines and withhold services from a product that you bought and paid money for because they promised it could do A, B, C, and D, but now they're saying, well, now you can't do that unless you get this authorization, and once you upgrade, you can't go back. Yeah, it just doesn't look like a good thing. So yeah, it's going to be very problematic. So anyway, that's the newest scuttle on the 3D printers and Bambu. Again, I was looking forward to the new Bambu, and we'll keep apprised of this, their new printer coming out. But yeah, now not so much. Maybe I'll have to look at Creality K2 Plus or, Prusa, even, the new Prusa Core 1, which looks really, really interesting. So yeah, some of the other comments here is just kind of crazy. I'm not even going to go over it. It's just going to piss me off. So anyway, please like and subscribe to the channel. I would appreciate that. And even more so, if you buy me a coffee, look at the link in the description box down below. These are the awesome people who have bought coffees. And I also had a couple more added on to that, but I'll update that one on the next video. So anyway, that's going to be it for today. What do you think about big corporations and companies requiring cloud authorizations for something that you bought and it works, and now they want to do a firmware upgrade so it won't work for you? What do you think? Put it in the comments. Thanks. Peace.